Somebody can come in and oftentimes get business credit cards, multiple of them, and they'd be able to take the cash out of these cards. But if you stick with those 3C formula, you get an idea of the kind of money you want. If you don't have one of those C's, they give you 5, 6, 7 different options that can work as alternatives if you don't have one of those strings. It literally is designed where if you try to improve one, you hurt another.
All right. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Beyond Seven Figures podcast. You know, as a business owner, you've probably heard the saying over and over again, cash is king. And as we've worked with thousands of businesses over the course of over 15 years now, one of the questions that I get quite often is, when's the right time for me to raise money? Now, as a young business owner, you're just getting started, you know that it takes capital to start a business in many cases, not all, but in many cases. And that's something that a lot of people understand. But then as you grow and you scale your organization, there's other periods where you do need cash. Sometimes that cash just comes in the form of a line of credit. Sometimes this cash can come in the form of a loan. But the worst time to actually need money is when you actually need money. And I want you to think about that for a minute. The worst time to ask for money is when you need money. The best time is to prepare ahead of time so that you have the cash, you have the flexibility before you actually need it. That allows you to become more attractive to the lenders. But because this comes up more and more, and you know, we oftentimes see this when either companies are innovating or maybe they've closed some big deals, but it's taken a little while to get cash to come in and get paid, or sometimes they're looking to hire some great labor, some A players and so forth. They just need a little bit of cash to kind of help them, or maybe they just want cash to add a little bit more of a buffer so that they're not stressing out. And so what I want to do today is, I didn't want to just bring you just anybody that was going to come talk about money. I wanted to bring somebody who could really educate all of us the best way to attract capital. Or let's say maybe your business or you have had some issues. Maybe your credit score is not perfect and whatnot. Does that disqualify you? Well, you know, apparently it doesn't. And so I want to talk to somebody that has worked with thousands of businesses to be able to help them attract more opportunities and do so at favorable rates so you're not raked over the coal. So as with anybody, when I look to bring them in, I want to find the best. And so I found this gentleman who's the largest business, he runs the largest business credit coaching operation in the entire world. And so without further ado, Ty from Credit Suite, welcome to the show, my friend.
All right, thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to be here.
Dude, you know, you and I have spoken quite a bit. I was just on your podcast. I loved your energy. And I think more importantly, you're just a very genuine, very authentic individual. I bring this up because in the world of business financing, it's just, for whatever reason, it just feels so dirty. You know, I got text messages probably, 6 times a day. People are just, hey, do you need any money for the business? And then you talk to people and you get jaded and you feel like you almost just can't trust them because they want to tell you everything that you want to hear, but they don't really know a lot about you or your situation. And they're just trying to get that deal, put some money in their pocket and so forth. And so it was actually really refreshing to meet with you because maybe it was your military background. Maybe it's just how you were raised or something about it, but you could tell that you generally want to be out there and help people. So I want to commend you for that.
I appreciate that. That means a lot for you.
Now, let's actually open this conversation up with the big one. Like, when should companies seek cash? And what are our options?
Well, realistically, somebody should seek cash before they even start the business. I think that, I'm often asked, what are some of the biggest mistakes that entrepreneurs make? And I think one of the biggest is to try to fund a business with your personal funds and personal credit. And, being seasoned entrepreneurs, we understand that things usually take at least twice as long as we anticipate, and they usually cost at least twice as much as what we think. But somebody that typically gets into business doesn't know those things. So they might say, hey, I need $5,000 to launch this business. And, I've got a credit card with, $20,000 limit. So the math made sense to spend that $5,000. But then what typically happens is it costs considerably more, longer to generate revenue. And then they kind of still try to use their personal assets, maybe leverage their personal home, really, or start using personal credit cards to fund the business. And then I just see some outfitters fall in this trap. And then what happens is they damage their consumer score so much that they could have went the right route and used those to get business credit cards or whatever they be to launch. But then at that point, their personal credit scores are so damaged, they can't do it. So I just see this cycle so many times because people think it takes less money and less time to actually get to a point where they need to get the business launched. So from what I've seen is the minute you think about starting a business, you should really be thinking about how much money you're going to need. You should double whatever your best estimate is. And then you should really be developing and working on a strategy right away to then start getting that capital ready in the business name specifically. So you have the cash, you have the available money to be able to make cash flow easier as you launch the business.
And what about for companies that are already running, say they're already generating 6, 7, maybe even 8 figures? What is that sign to say, hey, you want to make sure you have some cash? And does it always mean getting a loan, or why get a loan versus raise some sort of seed capital or whatnot, or venture capital for that matter?
Well, there's a lot of questions, a lot of things wrapped up in that. First of all, you should absolutely get any revolving credit you can get if your credit makes sense. If I'm ever offered a credit line, the rates are good, then I'm going to get the credit line because I'm not paying anything if I'm not using the line, right? So I should always stock up on revolving lines. I also do the same thing and recommend the same thing when you kind of feel the economy is going to shift, right? So we've seen enough that we know we're in a cyclical economy. We know things are going to go up and things are going to go down. There's enough predictive out there to have an idea of when things may go down. You need to be prepared for that. So being able to stock up on revolving credit, especially like credit lines, whenever you can get them, you should get those. And then that way you have them available when you need them. Because as you said, when people really need money and they're desperate, it's the worst time you could get money. Even if you get it, it's a fraction of what you need. You're paying way much higher rates than what you should. So get that revolving credit, especially on the business credit side. Like the minute you start a business, you should be building a business credit profile and score. If you're already established in business, that's catching up to you really quickly. And those are people I talk to all the time. They have 8-figure businesses. Then they try to get a credit line, or even worse, they have a credit line and they get it pulled because of business credit quality. In the business world, you'll be given failing business credit scores because you have zero credit. Like you have nothing on your credit profile. And Experian and Equifax know you exist. They give you failing scores. Then what happens is when you're trying to get loans and trying to get credit lines or trying to keep loans and credit lines you have, and the lenders are doing checks, then oftentimes you can lose that credit and not get the credit because you have no established business credit. Like in the business world, not having a credit profile and score already makes you high risk. So for those reasons, you should really be building business credit for the business right away. Gives the business the ability to fund itself, helps you get away from personal guarantees and personal credit checks, and then stock up on those credit cards and that revolving credit as much as you can get. When it comes to loans, really my best advice is 2 specific things. First of all, when the money is just really good and it makes sense. So for example, we just went through some pretty devastating hurricanes last year. So I helped a lot of my friends go through it to recover and get EIDL funds from SBA at 4% interest, 30-year term, and you don't have to make payments for a year. That's pretty ridiculous. I don't care how you invest, like whatever you're doing with that money, you could more than likely make more than 4%, right? So in that case, it just makes sense if you've been impacted to go and get that money. The second reason is maybe you just need to do it. You need to do something with the money. So we had a soft drink manufacturer company the other day, and they wanted to bring their bottling in-house. And by doing that, it increases their margins by like 60%. I mean, just substantial. So that makes sense. They're making a move that's going to result in a significant increase to the profit margin of the company or the revenue of the company. So in that case, like borrow the money to be able to do that if that's what you need to get it done. So I've really found in borrowing money, when the money is really cheap and it's easier to get, makes sense. And if you're going to use it for a specific purpose, probably 2 of the best reasons to get loans.
Mm-hmm. I think even EIDL, like you talked about, that's just one of those things that many people don't even think about. They go through a hardship due to some sort of natural disaster or whatnot, and they don't even think about that often as an option.
Yeah. A lot of people don't. That's why you kind of need to have access. It's when one of my buddies, Chris, owns this really, really, really cool company. And it was the same thing. He was, how to buy out a partner. Now the buyout is coming due. He's got these other things and he's out there looking for MCA money. And I'm like, doing this 35% interest money. This is a way better path. And then he ends up with a 4% interest loan, right? But that's the problem I think we have in this. I call it a cash access problem. The problem is there's so much money available now that lenders kind of focus on one or two or three types of money that they actually offer. And then the problem is that, if you find that lender, they may only have three options and you're going with the best of the three, but there's 100 other options out there through other funding sources. There's so much money, you don't know where to look or the type of money that would work best for you in your scenario. So most people that do run into money, they get way worse terms than they should because they're not finding the right money for what they're actually trying to accomplish.
Yeah. And I think what I often see too is, people go to the same bank that they've been doing their personal business with, and they go to that bank and they figure that's going to be their best bet for getting business financing. Yet I've seldom ever seen that actually to work out as being their best option. Why is that?
Look, there's a lot of value in having a relationship with bankers. And, we recommend clients, you have multiple different bank accounts in multiple different institutions. You start with your major banks. You have relationships with regional banks. You have relationships with credit unions. You really should. It makes sense, right? So I'm military, right? MacDill Air Force Base is right here by me in Tampa. Like MacDill Federal Credit Union, it doesn't make sense for me to not have accounts there and build relationships. But bank lending is very specific. It's FDIC insured, and it's very easy for me to play the card of banks being bad because that's kind of what's out in the world. But they're FDIC insured. They're required by law to be very conservative in their risk. So if business it's inherently risky. Like we are crazy for doing what we do and taking on what we take on. Like most people realize the insanity of what we try to do, and yet we love every minute of it. But from a lending perspective, risk, right? And so as a result of that, banks are not the best suited. They're not suited for entertaining people, especially in certain phases of business. Once you're 3 years in, you're 4 years in, your cash flow is stable, your revenue is climbing, your model is proven, you have collateral and assets, a good personal credit, established business credit. That might actually be the best option. They can get you access to SBA funds, and SBA funds can work really well for you in your scenario. But you've got to be in a really specific spot for that to make sense. The rest of us that are not in that spot, it just doesn't make sense. It's just not the best option because you're qualifying at a bank level and an SBA level, just really hard and hard money to get and a long time to be able to get it.
It's sad. I actually had a friend many years ago. His company was doing about $25 million a year, and they were growing year after year after year. It's doing great. And then he got this project, really awesome project, multi 7-figure project. This was going to just put them up over to that next level. And so they invested a lot of resources and manpower and technology in order to make that happen. They were getting paid from this client, but then the client reported back and says, hey, we need to extend our next payment. And so we're going to end up being, I can't remember if it was 60 or 90 days late. Now, as much as he wanted to force them to try to get them to pay sooner, he couldn't do that. And the result was that he didn't budget for this all of a sudden disruption in an income stream. And now he didn't have money to pay the team that he had. And then some of the technology and the infrastructure that he had, he didn't have that money to be able to cover that. And sadly, that one event actually tanked his entire company because it turned into this snowball effect. Once he didn't have money to pay some of these other things, and it just everything just boom, 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 snowballed. And it was the craziest thing I had ever seen. A month earlier, he was looking at buying a second home. Life was perfect. Everything was just, he was running the dream team. A month later, now he's literally going through the couch trying to find change to help, feed his family because it literally turned into an absolute disaster. So again, it's like, could have protected himself if he took the advice that you mentioned earlier and just said, look, you need to make sure that you have at least a credit line. Now there's other issues. This guy probably should have had a CFO that made sure he balanced and managed his cash correctly and all that other fun stuff, right? So there are other issues there, but so much of it could have been supported if he just had that line of credit.
That's why I say, like, there's no wrong time to get revolving credit. Get it all. Get it all when you could get it, period. And we stock up on credit lines all the time whenever we have them. And that way, it's really interesting because if you truly think about your business, first of all, it's completely unpredictable. I mean, imagine being a restaurant in COVID. Imagine having Airbnbs in COVID. You weren't even allowed to rent Airbnbs during COVID, right? So, and you have zero control over that. Nobody saw it coming. It's nothing to do with how you run a business or your business acumen. Like it is out of left field, right? And I owned a mortgage company when the whole thing blew up. I didn't see it coming. A lot of us didn't, right? So as a result of that, like I don't have control of the fact that I did jumbo mortgages and like that I no longer could. All the loans on the pipeline never closed and nothing closed in that market again for years. So I don't have control over so many things. And it's humbling as an entrepreneur to realize you don't really, no matter how good you are, you don't have control over a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And so you have to do your best to protect you, your business, and especially your family. And that's why business credit, there's no reason anybody should not be building business credit because that's what gets you down the road of separating personal guarantees, of separating liability, of you not personally being drugged down if anything does happen in the business and you can't save it. And then, you know, like we said, we stock up on all the revolving credit we can get. But even in that circumstance, you know, Dun & Bradstreet has tools where if you're going to have a client that's overwhelmingly a lot invested into or a large part of what you're doing, you should be using Dun & Bradstreet's tools to pull extensive data and report on them to know like what that company's risk rating is. Because more than likely, if you look at an scenario like that of that company, there were clear signs on a D&B report that things were going to go awry. And if you knew that before you went in, then you'd have a level of caution before you're extending those kind of terms to somebody like that. So, you know, be preventative as much as you can, obviously, as best as we can as entrepreneurs.
That's really smart. Now, let's talk about companies getting financing, right? Because it's one thing if you're highly profitable, you're making a lot of money, you got a good credit score, that part there is going to be a bit easier. But what about somebody that either has an imperfect credit score or maybe a fairly, you know, newer business, maybe that they've only been in business for 2 to 3 years. What if they're a service-based business? Those are often very difficult to finance because they don't have any assets. They don't have inventory. They just, you know, we're virtual companies that, you know, have a bunch of, you know, employees or so forth, but no real tangible asset. So how do you go about you make them fundable entities?
So you just hit on what I call the 3 C's cash access formula. You said we're doing to startup, no cash flow. We talked about a scenario where somebody doesn't have assets, service-based business, no collateral. And we also talked about somebody that has damaged personal credit, no credit. So when we look at this, or damaged credit. So this is the 3 C's. So if you look at it, there's 3 main things a lender will look for: cash flow, credit, and collateral. Now, if you have all 3 of those, you're going SBA. If you have collateral equal to what you're borrowing, you have good consumer business credit, you've got good cash flow verifiable and tax returns. Now you open up all windows. Now you're at term loans, now you're at SBA loans, you're at 10 to 30 year money, low price money. Yep. But if you don't have all 3, then you need to focus on what one of the strengths you have. You know, ever since Dodd-Frank back in 2008 passed, now we've seen this shift where 90% of money was from SBA. Now 90% of money comes from fintech. It comes from online. It comes from alternative lenders. And all alternative lenders, almost all of them, are fitting within one of those 3 categories. They're lending based on one strength, not all 3. Yeah. So an example is the most common kind of money today are merchant cash advances, revenue lending. It's shorter term money where you're factoring basically your future revenue. You're basically hedging your future revenue. We see this as like lower term, higher cost money. Well, that's just based on revenue. So if your credit sucks, you have no collateral, you can go get many types of money that just look at your cash flow, and the consistency of the cash flow is the strength to get you money. But maybe you don't have cash flow, you're a startup. Well, now we look at one of the other 2 C's. So now we look at consumer credit. So if you have good consumer credit, then we go to funding. It's based on good consumer credit. Example here is credit card stacking, or a program we call Credit Line Hybrid. Pretty good program. I mean, somebody can come in and oftentimes get business credit cards, multiple of them, and they'd be able to take the cash out of these cards. We had somebody we got approved for $160,000 like 2 weeks ago. Pretty good for a startup. Get $160K, 0% interest for 18 months. So then we're blending based on credit. The 3rd C is the biggest category of funding that exists, and that is asset-based or collateral-based lending. The reason it's the biggest is, geez, there are so many things people don't even realize could be used as assets to be able to collateralize a loan. So we look at things like stocks, bonds, where you can get 90% financing, leveraging those. You don't even have to liquidate. Like you could still earn money in the market and then double leverage them to get a credit line to be able to do whatever you want with it. You know, in this case, regarding funding a business, you could use 401k IRA. So instead of investing into other people's company, you could roll it back into your own and invest it in your own. You could leverage cryptocurrency, still leave it there, still earning what it earns, but then actually get a credit line of 50% of the value and use that. Within a business, you could use your customer list. You could use a business license. You could use a license like a liquor license. You could use IP, trademarks. I mean, most assets, vehicles, homes, the buildings itself could be leveraged to be able to get some kind of asset-based finance, equipment, inventory. You can use that kind of money to buy that stuff, inventory financing to buy inventory, e-commerce inventory financing to be able to buy all the e-commerce inventory you're selling online. Or you could get financing to leverage those things you already have to be able to get money. But the question is, which of the C's do you have? Now, in a scenario where you have none, no cash flow, you're a startup. You have bad credit. You have no collateral. Now you need to build business credit. What you need to do now is create a lendable asset since you have no lendable asset. And then you're building your credit profile. You're building your credit score. You're getting 10K at Best Buy and 20 at Lowe's and 30 at Staples and 20 at Apple and $30,000 Visa without PGs and credit. Then you're using that to fuel the business until you establish one of those C's. So that's really the formula is the 3 C's. Now, if you have none, other options, or you've also got angel investing, you've got venture capital at that part, you've got crowdfunding can work at that part, personal loans and peer-to-peer lending that's looking at personal income instead of business revenue. But if you stick with those 3 C formula, you get an idea of the kind of money you want. If you don't have one of those C's, they give you 5, 6, 7 different options that can work as alternatives if you don't have one of those strings.
When you say building investable credit so that you no longer have to sign personal guarantees on everything that you're doing, you're saying the best way to do that is to start by getting different credit cards, showing that you're paying them off, getting a line of credit, and then showing that the business is creating a good history. Did I understand that correctly?
In the consumer world and business world, different. If I go to Target today and I have a big order, they're going to offer me a credit card for 20% off, and that credit card's going to report to my consumer credit reports. I know it will. Business credit world is the opposite. It's estimated, and I'm very conservative in this estimate, but it's estimated that 90% or more of all trade vendors that issue money do not report the money. So in our world, the business world, really significantly less than 10% of vendors that issue credit report. So you have to be really intentional about building business credit. It's not just about getting money. It's about getting money that reports. So if I'm launching a business today, I'm going to go to Granger. I'm going to go to CEO Creative. I'm going to go to these kind of places like Uline. I'm going to get small credit lines. I'm going to buy stuff that I need. I'm going to pay them back. They're going to report to the business credit reporting agencies. That's going to report as what we call trade lines. Then you have a credit profile. Now you have a credit score that reflects how you pay. Now with that established profile and score, now I can go get more credit. If I'm in transportation, I go get fuel cards at Pilot Flying J. If I'm, working in an office like we do, I'm going to get credit at Staples and Sam's Club and Office Depot to get printers and, monitors. And I'm going to Apple to be able to get phones and iPads and all the stuff we need. So you got to be intentional to go to get credit that reports. But once you do that, the more you get, the more it compounds and the more credit becomes available to you to a point where you're getting auto financing. Like you got somebody $350,000 with no personal guarantee weeks ago at Ford. When you're able to get Visa cards, MasterCards, Amex cards, you can get all that without guarantees or credit checks. And if you're wise about what you're doing, 90% of what you truly need to buy in your business, even advertising, websites, sales funnels, you can pay for using that business credit. Even if you had no cash flow, no credit, no collateral, you can still literally get $1 million in business credit through all these vendors, through universal cash credit like Visa card, and use that to be able to do business.
Now, is this very much like in the personal world? If you get a lot of credit, then, it impacts your personal credit score. But as you're doing this for the first time in a business and you open up all these credit lines at Staples and Uline, everything that you're mentioning, does that also impact your personal credit while you're building your business credit?
It doesn't. And that's what's interesting. Consumer FICO score is a real mess. Like I owned a consumer credit company and sold it many years ago. And if you really understand FICO and the math of FICO, it is a mess. I mean, it literally is designed where if you try to improve one, you hurt another. So if I don't have the right mix of credit, then my credit score is lower. But if I try to apply to get new credit to fix the mix problem, now I'm putting inquiries on, not lowering my score. I can sit here for an hour. Like the math, as you literally try to improve one part, you lower another, and it's very tough. And that's why It takes many years of very well-disciplined borrowing for most of us to get to 800 scores. In the business world, though, the most common score we're all familiar with, paychecks. Paychecks is based on one thing and one thing only: how you pay your bills. That's it. Like, you literally pay your bills on time, you have an 80 paychecks. If you pay early before terms, you have an 81, 85, 89. Your score literally reflects how early on terms you're paying. Or if you're late, your score reflects exactly how late you on average are paying. All we have to do really in the business world are get accounts to report to the reporting agencies and pay those on time or early. And don't get me wrong, the bureaus have other scores in the business world, and those might take into account public records. So we want to avoid lawsuits and collections and all that kind of stuff. We want to build a business that has more employees. There's a lot more to it. But the main scores used by lenders and credit issuers and provided by the business reporting agencies are based on one thing and one thing only: how you pay your bills. Inquiries have zero impact in the business world, how much credit you're applying for, because publicly accessible data. Like, I can't go get your personal credit report without your permission, permissible purpose, or in the Fair Credit Reporting Act. But I can go pull your commercial report. I can pull your DB report right now without your permission. So that's publicly accessible data. So since anybody can pull your commercial credit report, inquiries can't have an impact because we can't control who's actually trying to pull our reports in and give it to them.
Fascinating. But you run this company, Credit Suite. Why would somebody choose to work with you as opposed to just shopping it themselves, shopping for different financing options themselves?
Well, look, it's whether you use us or not. I can tell you, I've been in finance. I spent my professional career in finance, and I will always use a broker. Like, if I'm looking for a mortgage for my house, I'm going to go through a mortgage broker. I'm not going to go to a bank. And that's just because they're just options. If I go to a bank, I'm limited to the options they have. And if you use a broker in whatever you're doing, trying to sell your business, trying to get, a mortgage, trying to get any kind of money, they just have more options. And they also have more clout and relationships with the lenders to be able to get a greater ability of things done. So that's what I would say. Whether you're using Credit Suite or any other broker, it just makes sense to find somebody that's a super broker, seasoned in the space, that has access to lenders and has built those relationships. Because first of all, they have a lot more options for you. And secondly, they got a lot more clout. Like, you might be out there trying to get $250,000 deal when we funded $30 million, right? So like, when I go to the bank and say, help this guy out, they're more inclined to help it out than if you're the guy trying to get 250 and you say, help me out, right? Because they want me to continue to do another $30 million of business. The way the brokerage modeling works in the funding space, and there's some people there, I'm not taking to the people that don't do things ethically, that definitely that share out there, but you're not even paying any more money. Like, the lender pays the equivalent of a referral fee to us or to other brokers. Yeah. So like, a lot of times, we don't charge anybody money for help. Somebody can come to us and get all of our services, our team, our processing team, our technology, our relationships with lenders, our finance specialists, for no cost. And then we can negotiate, get better terms than you'd ever get on your own. So that's really the reason you want to use a broker. You've got a lot more options, a lot more clout with lenders. Those brokers can come in and negotiate to get you better terms than you'd ever get on your own. And realistically, in a lot of cases, you're not even paying anything for that service because the lender's giving some kind of kickback or referral fee to the broker. So you don't even lose anything to get all those benefits.
And what's the incentive for a company like Credit Suite to negotiate better terms going through you than, like a house broker? Like, they get paid based on the amount of money that the transaction happens. What's the incentive for a company like Credit Suite to negotiate the best terms possible?
We've obviously a different vision than most out there, right? Most out there are a one and done. They're going to get your money and then they're going to get out. For us, our strategy as a company and philosophy as a company is to be with you from time you found it all the way to the time till you sell it, right? That's our philosophy. Is we want to help you get the 10K you need to start a business. We want to help you get the money as you're getting to a point where you're generating revenue. We want to get you to a point where you're generating revenue and then, getting collateral. And we want to help you when the buyer shows up to go help them get acquisition funding to actually buy the business. So that's the way that we operate. Not a lot are. I think we're the only companies out there you'll find that do that. So our incentive for us is customer lifetime value. It's to maintain that customer. It's that, my vision for this has always been that, like, if you need accounting, accounting questions, you go to your accountant. Like, whatever you need, you have a specialist. So why would you not have a funding specialist in your back pocket? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, if you need money, you should immediately know who to call to get it. So if you get an offer in the mail or an offer through email, or you see this, then you have somebody to ask. You have somebody that's going to give you an honest opinion. And if they're good at what they do, typically they would be able to, give you honest feedback and then crush whatever that offer is that you're getting. So for us as a company, that's just the way we see things. We're looking for a lifetime relationship to fund somebody throughout the lifetime of their business. But you have to be careful. A lot of people out there, that's just not the way they operate. They're just trying to get you money that you need at that point in time.
See, you're smart. You do have that long-term vision, because as long as you're operating in the best interest of somebody else, you're going to earn their loyalty. So I've shared this story multiple different times in this podcast, but it's worth repeating. You've heard of Darwin's survival of the fittest.
Sure, absolutely. Darwinism.
Yeah. So, but most people, they think of Darwin's survival of the fittest in our world, in the human world, and the human experience is you have to be the most ruthless, badass killer out there, right? And if you're the toughest person out there, then you're going to survive over everybody else. A gentleman named Buckminster Fuller, he actually discovered something different. So what Bucky did is he realized in observing the world out there, and he says, wait a minute, starting with the animal kingdom, if you look at the way the lions operate, it's not the toughest lion. It's not because he could destroy anybody else. It actually makes him the fittest. The pride around him, they realize that because of that one lion that is able to protect the rest of the pride, that the other lions conspire around the king of the jungle to help his survival. So they'll go out there and they'll kill food and they'll bring it to him. They'll let him have the first bite, and, they'll let him sleep and they can take care of the small stuff. But, should a predator come in or some danger, they know they can count on that big lion to come in and save the rest of the pride. So as that translates into the human and the business world, what we recognize is that if you're able to help your clients get a better result, if you're able to get them closer to the desires that they want, the aspirations and so forth, solve different pains, and you're able to do that better than anybody else out there, you're aiding to their survival, you're aiding to everything else. And so what they do is they reward you with their loyalty. They reward you with their referrals. And that's why you see companies, when they go into a little bit of struggle, it's the entire community that surrounds to kind of help lift them up, because they've always been best for the community. They've been best for individuals. So we've long talked about predictable profits. You get paid in direct proportion to the value that you bring others, because it is part of like that Darwin's model. And we've seen that with you too. When you're focusing in on, you go, you know what, I might subordinate short-term some of our own profit interests by getting our clients a better rate and a better terms than they normally would have anywhere else off the street. Your clients recognize that. And they recognize that and they go, you know what, the next time I need money, I'm not going anywhere else. I'm going to Credit Suite. When they have a friend that says, hey, I need a little bit of money, that says, you know what, you got to go over to Credit Suite because these guys are going to take real good care of you, because you've earned that by your focus is on how do I add more to the survival of the others? How do I add more to help those others? And that helps to just build a lot more robustness. People oftentimes, and you hear this in, B-school conversation, this idea that, it's only business. And growing up in the business world, you hear this over time. Oh, it's only business. Separate business and personal, business and personal. I think that's the wrong advice. I think the competitive advantage out there is that when you can care more than others, when you actually make business personal, when you really want to understand what's most important to this person, how do I make business personal? That's when, again, you're aiding to somebody else. What's really important to them? How can I support them? And so forth. And, that's another reason why, you're operating the largest business coaching, credit coaching company in the world. You're great at what you do, but it's because you care more than the other people in your space.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I see that very similar. It's interesting because I owned a mortgage company when that whole thing collapsed. And so I lost it all. I mean, everything, business, personal. I mean, I remember literally trying to pass bad checks to get the electric back on in my home. So like our then pregnant wife didn't come home to know electric. I mean, things just still make me cry to this day, But I tell you, and it sounds cliche. That was 2008. Yeah. And when you go through that, repos and foreclosures, just everything that's the worst of everything. And that's why I'm here, because I guaranteed everything. Like I saw the worst of the worst that I created by making those mistakes. And that education did not exist at that time. It just did not exist for me out there. Like I've tried to make it a point to make sure that other people you have it. Like if you choose to do nothing with this knowledge you get today, that's okay for me. At least you have it. At least you know it. You have an advantage that I didn't have because at least you know that there are options out there. But it's interesting. It sounds cliche because that was the first time that I really stopped doing business to make money. And legitimately, I was in so much pain. Like my body physically, as I sit here, just reacts thinking about that. And I just wanted to rescue other people from pain or prevent them ever getting to that level. And it's like, once you get humble like that, it's just a shift in your entire physical being that you just want to help and live a life of service. And when you click into that mode, so many things change. Like if business credit's important to me, then I should be teaching people how to do it for free. Don't get me wrong. There are people that want a better result and that will pay us for coaching and software and all the stuff we have to get it. But everybody that can't afford that should still have a path with our knowledge to be able to get to where they want to be. And that is what builds this massive community and tribe about you. And I'm still shocked about that. Once in a while, somebody will say something bad online of this. And then I'm shocked at all of these people that come to our rescue and support that are people that will maybe never pay us a dime of money. They don't have the money to pay, but yet they're out there and they're so loyal to us and to our mission because we've always been there to lift them up and to help them and to educate and give them everything they need to succeed. And they know they have a path that they want the faster, easier route. So I've just always believed that. I mean, ever since that day in the mortgage industry, I just fundamentally believe you live a life of service. And when you do that, just in your life, personal business, everything falls into place. I don't know about you, but that's one of the fundamental things I teach my kids constantly is you just have to always live a life of service. There's just no other way to really live your life. Otherwise, I just don't think the energy of that is that a present of where we are will ever get behind you and support your cause or what you're trying.
That feeling of truly making a difference and a transformation in somebody's life when they come to you with tears in their eyes because you helped them so much, that feeling is exponentially greater than closing a big sale. Like there's something that goes all the way down to every cell of your body that just feels so good. And it's an addictive type feeling. It just, when you feel that, it's like you want to do more, you want to help more, you want to make bigger impacts and so forth. And I know what you're saying, man. And I didn't know that actually about your story. I wish we had a lot more time because I'd love to be able to explore that more and how you got out of it. But if there's one thing that I'm willing to bet, because I've gone through a very similar story myself, where the pain was so bad that I'm driving on the road. And I remember saying a little prayer that I hope that somebody would just hit me head on and just be done and over with. Because I didn't want to do it myself, but I was in so much pain. I just couldn't imagine continuing in that way. But now I can look back and I can say, wow, if I didn't experience all of that stuff and all of that pain, I wouldn't have made certain decisions that brought me to different people and different decisions and that got me to now where I am today, which I feel internally blessed and grateful for. And I imagine you could look back as painful as those experiences were and to some degree have some gratitude for those experiences because look at you now, right? You got to be proud of where you're at right now.
Oh yeah. Listen, and I don't know about you, but I would change an ounce of it for anything, all the pain, because it fundamentally changed everything that put me on the path I'm supposed to be on. But I think we have to have these discussions because so many times we're on here and you see the best of people on social and the best of whatever they're talking about on podcasts. But man, like what you just described, like that's a real thing. Like having that kind of pain where you're lonely, like your family doesn't understand it. Like a lot of your friends, like you're lonely. There are people watching this right now that are going through that and they think they're alone and you're not alone. Like, I mean, a lot of us have struggled or even are currently struggling with this, no matter what the facade is on the outside. And the reality is people need to know you're not alone. That's part of this process we go through of just being so alone and so sad and feeling like there is no hope, that whatever ends you're looking at, there, you just don't even feel that there's a path forward. And that's where you just got to drive forward. Because from my perspective, I think yours too, when we look back, I wouldn't give that up for anything. Like I am glad that I went through that. Like there's so many things I learned that made me better that I would never give that up. Even going through it, I knew at the time that I would not sacrifice it because I knew that long-term it would have benefits. And you just have to realize that there's no such thing as bad experience as long as you learn something from it and apply it to make your life and other people's lives better.
It's funny because one of the lessons that I learned from that experience is now when I experience challenge, because you do experience challenge, there's ups and downs, no matter how successful you are, you're going to experience challenge. Now my mindset changes immediately, and I'll take a step back and I'll give gratitude for the challenge. And I'll say something along the lines of, why is this happening for me? But, in my mind, I'll be asking, why is this happening for me? Not to me, but for me. And I'll just give gratitude for, okay, there's a reason for this. This is happening for me. I may not know why right now, but it will show itself at some point. And I'll just sit in this place of gratitude, which helps to lower my stress, but it opens up my mindset and opens up my perspective to look for the opportunities, because I'm like, this is happening for me. Why? Who am I supposed to meet? How am I supposed to change my behaviors? What strategy am I supposed to deploy? And it does actually get you out of these challenges faster and also create a much more powerful outcome.
Yeah, 100%. My default now is, oh, that could have been worse. And in an instant, the gratitude, like every time, like when something bad happens, I was like, oh my God, like that could have been so much worse than it was. Like this can happen, this can happen, this can happen. Like I broke, like just on the person I got broke a toe like months ago. And I was like, wow, that table falling on it, I could have broke my, like my brain immediately defaults to what could have been significantly worse. And then it stopped there. And then, like you said, then it goes to just this overwhelming gratitude that like, that's all that happened. And then, then it goes to what could have prevented that? What signs did I clearly miss? Because that's interesting. I think I found too, is the best things happened at the tail of the worst things I found in business. Then I'm like, well, could the best things happen if the worst things didn't happen? And when I really dove into this and studied everything I could, it's like, there are clear warning signs usually up to the bad thing that you've ignored. And if you just look at them and you do let them escalate, you look back, you're like, oh yeah, because that was a clear sign. This was a problem here. And there's just things you ignored. And then that's the things that you applied and make you better. And you're not going to do that again. You're like, next time I'm going to look for this and look for this and look for this. I mean, exactly in alignment the way you're describing.
Well, if you look at the way that a diving board works, right, you have to be able to go down, and the further that you go down, the higher that you go back up, right? And so I used to run this multi-million-dollar proprietary stock trading company. I built algorithms, I ran them in the markets and so forth. It was a business that I started after another business, and I just wanted to be able to sit by my computer for a little bit and just, do my thing. And so, I look at the stock market as a visual representation of human behavior. And so, right now, when you go to reach a new high, you often hit this thing called support. Right? Support is where you get a lot of this resistance. And sometimes when you hit support, it brings you back down again. And so, it brings you back down, and then it can create, if there's enough of that momentum, it can create this opportunity where you shatter, or actually resistance is what I meant to say, right? You hit this resistance. When you go about to break through this new high, you hit this resistance. And then you break down, you smash through that resistance, but yesterday's resistance become today's support. Right? So you go down, you smash through that resistance that eventually becomes that support. But you look at the things now that you're faced with and you're like, wow, you might be dealing with challenges right now. But then if you dealt with these challenges maybe 3 or 4 years ago, you probably wouldn't have been prepared, because it was the little challenges that you focused 3 or 4 years ago that built your strength to get you to a point where you're at now. Before I ask you one last question, I'll finish up with this story. So many years ago, my wife and I invested $250,000 to travel the world with Tony Robbins. And so I meet up with Tony up in Whistler, Canada. And Tony says to me, hey, let me ask you a question. What's the biggest problem you're faced with right now? And I'm like, well, it's an interesting question. So I'm like, well, I've got this real estate development project that I'm working on. And, I've got this issue and I got that issue, and I'm stressed because of this one. He says, who's your professional role model? Well, Richard Branson. Do you think Richard Branson would lose, I don't know, like 1/10 of a second of sleep on the problems that you say are your biggest problems right now? Do you think he would lose 1/10 of a second of sleep? And I'm like, probably not. I mean, this guy, he's trying to do this thing and this thing and this thing and this thing. I mean, do you think those are big problems? I'm like, yeah, he's dealing with some really big problems. And how are your problems compared to his? I guess little. Tony, I guess I'm confused. What's the point in this? And he goes, I'm sizing you up. So what? He goes, big people have big problems. Little people have little problems. Little people will run away from their problems, whereas big people will create big problems for themselves. And in that moment, I'm going, damn, no wonder he's this good. So, it changed my mindset before, because when you're playing small problems, you look at them as just that, as negative problems. But when you're playing that big, problems are actually opportunities. You look at, Elon Musk, who talks about wanting to colonize Mars, and he publicly talks about it, gets ridiculed, right? And that's a huge problem. He's spending billions of dollars trying to do that. But actually, if you ask Elon about that, he's going to say it's an opportunity. It's not a problem. It's an opportunity to do something, or any Richard Branson, all these other people, they're focusing on opportunities, not problems, not something to run away from. So, Ty, this is the Beyond Seven Figures podcast. What would you say is your biggest, best tip for our listeners who want to take their business beyond seven figures?
I would say we kind of already covered it. I think that you need to get credit and money before you need it. I stock up on all the revolving credit you can get, especially right now. Things are so unpredictable. We just don't know what's happening. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know the changes that are taking place are going to affect inflation, affect people's, we just don't know.
Yeah.
So get all the revolving credit you can get and make sure you're building a business credit profile and score the minute you start your business. If you haven't already, get started now. And that sets you up for success. It really helps you be proactive. So that way you add the money. We gotta look at things is that, like, rarely is there a problem in business that if you had enough money, you probably wouldn't be able to navigate through. And if you think about your worst things, your SWOT analysis, the biggest things you're afraid of, if you had enough access to capital, you could probably push through those things and buy yourself enough time to figure out the rest. So do that, make sure that you have access to the funds that you need before you need them is probably the best piece of advice.
And for our listeners today, can you tell us a little bit just about Credit Suite and the resources, the tools, and everything that you have available to help our listeners accomplish some of these funding goals that they have for themselves?
Yeah, there's three areas that we really focus. The first is what we call funding ready, meaning that we really dive in to figure out what lenders and credit issuers want to see, the secret reports like LexisNexis and check systems they're using, how they're making decisions, and then help business owners understand here is what it takes to be able to get approved for the most money at the best terms. Like, you understand what they're looking for, you can meet the criteria and you can succeed. So funding ready is a big part of what we do to make sure that people can get the money they want when they need it at the best terms. And then the second thing is building business credit, building a commercial credit profile and score, getting away from those personal guarantees, the personal liabilities, creating an asset where the business can actually help fund itself. And then the third is accessing all types of capital in one place, something we tried to tackle for the last decade. But now all that knowledge we've gained, AI shows up. It's like, wow, okay, now we could feed all of this and create our own AI that now helps make it easy for business owners to know all the money they can get. And usually a lot of people that don't think they can get approved can, and a lot of people that do get approved for even more than they think they can. And we combine different kind of funding products. So that's one of the things I really love about what we do is being able to help people in all three areas: funding ready, building business credit, and then accessing all forms of capital in one place.
And, you gave me a quick demo of the product and the different options. If I was to kind of take several steps back and look at some of the decisions that I made in funding my own different business operations, I would have changed it. And I actually, genuinely speaking, I would have gone through Credit Suite, because you were highlighting a lot of information and opportunities that nobody ever told me about before. And I like to think I know more than the average bear. Nobody told me about this stuff before. And I think about all the different ways that I may have overpaid for loans, or maybe even got credit in the wrong way. And things that nobody teaches you. You just don't, you don't learn about this in school. You really don't read about it much over the internet or in books and whatnot. And so I do appreciate how you opened my eyes to that. What I'd love to do at some point is bring you in. I know we've talked about it, bring you into our community and being able to have you share more of those really deep insights to be able to help, countless 6, 7, and 8 figure companies find even more ways to have that access to capital, reduce their stress, increase their opportunities, create much more of that scalable, predictable growth. You're an extraordinary guy. Eventually your head's just going to get too big because I feel like every time I talk to you, I keep telling you just how extraordinary you really are. You're a breath of fresh air in the industry. You're real genuine, authentic. I love the fact of your approach. Now I understand where it came from about really wanting to help people. So thank you for that. And creditsuite.com would be the best place for people to learn more about you and the different options that you have. Is that correct? Or would you like to sense?
It's pretty cool. We've got a creditsuite.com/blueprint, and that's credit suite stuff, SUITE. So creditsuite.com/blueprint. We have a funding blueprint. We just literally rolled out, and it's really cool because you go through and it pulls data from the business credit reporting agencies, and then it uses AI, and it will tell you a funding ready score, exactly what's wrong from a lender's perspective, exactly what to do to fix it. Then it also tells you all funding you can qualify for and gives you the next step to go through and get all that funding. And then it actually gives you custom business credit recommendations based on what's on your business credit report too. And then you can get a free Dun & Bradstreet credit report score from there, even an assessment, all of that in that one place. So that's at creditsuite.com/blueprint.
I love it, man. Love it, love it, love it. Always a pleasure to talk with you. And so again, creditsuite.com/blueprint. And then for those of you who are looking for additional tips, strategies, and information to grow your business faster, more predictably, and then less dependent on you, check us out at predictableprofits.com. Again, that's predictableprofits.com. Hey, I also encourage you to go over to LinkedIn, Ty Crandall, that's Ty, and then his last name, Crandall. I also encourage you to go check him out, follow him over there on LinkedIn too. He's got some cool information there. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up today's episode. This is Charles Gaudet with my dear friend Ty Crandall, and I will see you in another episode.